So I was going to comment on something you just said, or we're talking about how the gods like come down in the poem. Obviously.
Yeah.
Because when I read it, I've read the Iliad, and it was cool how the gods would like come down and fight. Now in the movie, that obviously doesn't happen. They do talk about the gods a lot, and they talk about the wrath of the gods and stuff. And it's implied that the wrath does come down on a few people. And but I think kind of, it's not really known whether it was the wrath of the gods or it was just they just got killed.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I will say this: I've watched some interviews with the director and the screenwriter and such, and they were talking about how kind of a little bit of the reasoning why they didn't want to have the gods come down in physical form, and what they were, it kind of made sense to me. They thought that they wanted to go for a more gritty version. They didn't, and if you in this gritty movie, and it is pretty gritty, as you said, like it's going for a more gritty take on the story, and. If all of a sudden these gods just come flying down out of nowhere, or even if they had scenes up in the heavens like that are in the Iliad, it would have been a little bit off tone. So I actually commend the filmmakers for choosing a tone and choosing a style and sticking to that, even though it's not necessarily completely faithful to the poem. I appreciate that they actually just stuck to their guns.
I think they could have done it better because they can take out the gods. You can do that. That's totally doable and still hold true to what happened in the narrative.
Oh no, no, I'm just talking about just
they not only take out the gods, but then they also throw out the narrative.
Yeah.
And they could have done so much with that duel scene. Yeah. That could have been. It could have been like a draw and they both get each other injured, but neither of them die. Or Paris runs away, or the duel never happens. Yeah. How about we just skip that? Let's cut down the runtime a little bit.
But then they would have completely abandoned that plot point. So would you?
I would have been down for that.
I mean, just more than what they did.
More than what they did because Menelaus dies.
Yeah, he doesn't die. In the
Helen has. And at the end, Paris and Helen live happily ever after, which is very horrible.
I agree with your negative on Menelaus. They should not have killed Menelaus.
Yeah.
Because all it does is give Agamemnon more of a reason to just be a jerk and be all like prideful and stuff. That's literally all it does. Like, why not just have there was something else they could have done besides having him be killed. I agree. That's personally my least favorite departure they made from the story. And I think they should not have killed Menelaus because it doesn't do anything for the plot of the movie. Like, it doesn't add anything. A few of the changes they make kind of add some dramatic effect to stuff, but not that one. That was just egregious.
I think one thing that you said at the beginning though was that the writers were trying to make it seem that you could choose one side or the other.
Yeah.
The Iliad and the Trojan War is not written like that.
Yeah.
We are on the Greek side.
Yeah.
And even though we really like Hector,
there are some scenes on the Trojan side.
There totally are. Yeah. And I think that for a Greek audience, they madly respect Hector. His body actually ends up getting transported to Greece because they respect him so much. They get his body to come back over. So they were obsessed with Hector and some of those characters. But if you asked any Greek, but if you asked most of the readers of the Iliad, whose side are you on? You're on the Greek side.
Yeah.
And I think the movie tried to play two sides, and that's not accurate to neither the story.
It's not accurate, but I do think from a film perspective it worked. As from in the movie it worked. But I do agree it's obviously not what happens in the
Gavin,
movie.
would you like to talk about some of the technical aspects as far as weaponry, food, clothing, society, nitty-gritty details?
So this is more like talking about not as much the story like this, but just like the Greek civilization stuff and like what that would have been looking like. A lot of it was pretty good. Like, I liked some of it.
What did you like?
What I liked, the armor, like, you mentioned that it was flaky, but it looked cool and it looked decently. Like, they would have had it wouldn't have been really finely decorated. The Iliad describes it as beautiful.
Yeah.
But
Ice just made it.
Yeah, we can imagine it to have been pretty raw. Big raw shields. Swords, I like that they didn't have any, like, necessarily, like, intricate handles. It would have just been the hilt and then like a short blade that might have had some edges somewhere in there.
Yeah. But they would have used the short swords. Yeah,
short swords, big, heavy reliance on javelins.
Yeah. That was like the common weapon for the foot soldier.
Yeah, big time. Not a lot of chariots. There could have been more. There were some, but not as frequent as we might see them in the Iliad specifically.
What about rituals? I mentioned that I appreciated that they included a lot of scenes of the Trojans, mostly offering rituals and sacrifices to the gods. Like, what do you think of that?
I think they did a pretty good job. I think some of my favorite parts were probably the when they're burning the bodies, the pyres, which felt really accurate. Yeah. They didn't do any games at the end, and there weren't any sacrifices to go along with it. The Greeks would have done sacrifices of animals plus victims along with it as part of the thing. But they got the coins right. They put the coins in their eyes, so that was cute. Yeah. They do libations every once in a while, which is where you pour out wine for the gods. So that was cool. The priest of Apollo had a lot of say in the affairs, which was pretty cool. The irony is the priest of Apollo is actually the one who actually tells them not to bring the Trojan horse.
In the poem?
And he gets eaten by snakes.
Oh, but it wasn't, but in the movie they don't call him by his name though.
Yeah, no.
They do, it is
it's like a Medes? No, wait,
Laocoon. Laocoon is
right,
not in the movie. There's another priest that says they should bring it in. I honestly, it would have been cool. Is Laocoon even in the Iliad though?
No, he's in the
Aeneid. Yeah, so I got why. I can understand why they didn't include him.
There was a call out to Aeneas too. I appreciated that. But
I thought you said you in the.
I didn't like it, but at least it was that.
Why didn't you like it?
Because he was too young.
He was too young.
And Aeneas is actually in the Iliad. He's a warrior.
He is. Yeah. I was surprised when I read it because I didn't know he was going to be in it.
No, yeah, he's totally in it, and Aphrodite has to save him because Diomedes is about to kill him.
Now, one thing I'd like to get. Oh, Nate, do you have any thoughts on what we've been talking
about? No, I just wanted to hear from Gavin as far as the technical aspects because I don't really have any first-hand knowledge.
I think some other things. There was that moment in Sparta. Spartan culture did not look like that. That was really inaccurate.
Also, there's no port of Sparta, to my knowledge. It's not even on a.
I don't know.
I've read that. There's that in the beginning of the movie. They take you to the port of Sparta. Sparta's not even on.
I feel like it is, but
Sparta's not near an ocean. I don't think. I might be wrong, but anyway.
I don't remember.
I think that's a land-ridden city, right? Anyway,
landlocked,
my bad.
Land-ridden.
It's not near the ocean. Is what I'm saying. Yeah, I might be wrong, but that would.
I like the what else?
What about the helmets? Like the Greek helmets versus the Trojan helmets.
No, the llamas were bizarre as frick.
You pointed out that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the helmets were pretty. There was a lot of variety. Yeah. You saw the poor people. Here was one. Oh, big one. The Trojans. All get weapons from the government. Yeah. The government gives them weapons.
He pointed this out in the movie.
And the Greeks also get weapons, so they all look the same. They have uniforms. So all the Trojans are wearing blue, and I don't know what the Greeks were wearing. It was like brown or something.
Yeah, brownish.
And so that was so inaccurate. Greeks, governments didn't have enough money to do that for their soldiers. Greeks had to bring their own weapons, which was as a person living in Greece or Troy at the time, you had to have your own weapons because you were fighting for survival, right? The times are just so tough. Yeah. You were living in such a wilderness. You were always prepared to fight. So you had your own sword, and depending on how rich you were, was how nice of an armor set you had. Yeah. So if I'm a really rich...
That's why they're always in the poem fighting for the armor of the dead.
Exactly.
Like you get it if you...
Yeah. That's why people are stripping armor
literally
off of each
in the
bodies.
poem, if I remember right. Yeah. Patroclus, they literally... There's a whole battle
fighting
over
his body
and his armor.
And guess who gets it?
Which is Achilles' armor. But...
Yeah. Well, it's Achilles' old armor, and Hector's the one that gets it. And so he's wearing it when he gets killed.
That would have been cool if they had included that. They should have included that.
I wish they had emphasized the armor maybe a little bit more. Yeah. Just like the uniqueness. Yeah. And it stood out. Because you might not have recognized that Patroclus was wearing Achilles' armor. Because Achilles' armor kind of looked like everybody else's.
A few things, unless you have any thoughts, I was going to say something real quick about the comparing it to the poem. Yeah. So from having read the Iliad and watching this movie several times, there are certain things that I did appreciate that they got right, I feel like, from the poem. Okay. A few of them are this. I think that they got Achilles' character kind of right in the sense of his commitment to just... He's fighting for honor.
True.
And that's his whole thing. He's not there for Agamemnon. He's not there for Greece. Like, sure. And there's a really great scene where Sean Bean, in all his glory, is talking to Achilles, and he has this great one-liner where he's like, you need to learn to serve in order to lead. And that's just one of those great lines. And he basically, because Achilles is like, he does not care about Greece. He's like, Greece will be here long after I'm dead. And then the poem, he really is also just fighting for honor, really. Like, he's not there for Greece. He's really almost just there for his honor.
Either honor or revenge.
And that was and you can tell us about this, but that was a big thing in Greek society. Like, honor and glory was like everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. And I think I wasn't necessarily just honor and glory. I think what the Iliad starts, it begins by telling you, what is this book about? It's about wrath. Yeah. It's about this uncontrollable rage and anger that the characters feel that compel them to do what they do. Yeah. So it's not that Achilles, I mean, he does go for glory and stuff, but a lot of the death and destruction he brings is because he's invoked to wrath. He brings death and destruction to the Greeks. Yeah. He does that because he decides not to help them. Yeah. And so he lets them all die just because he's angry that Agamemnon stole what's her name. So
in the poem, is Achilles as philosophical as he is in the movie?
Oh my god!
So they got that kind of right.
One of my favorite parts is when the embassy led by Odysseus tries to come to convince Achilles to come back, and he's just refuting them. Yeah. He's just blasting them the entire time, and it's really, really good.
I don't know about you, but I appreciate that they had him be a kind of a philosophical character in the movie. A little bit.
It was. You know,
and so a second beat that I thought they hit pretty well was the scene with Andromache and Hector. So Andromache is Hector's wife, and there's a scene where they're in their bedroom, and it's the night. Yeah. I think it's the day before the Hector Paris' duel with Menelaus, and there's the scene where where he's like holding the baby, and she's talking about how she's lost all of her brothers in the Spartan wars, and that is a scene in the poem, and obviously the dialogue isn't what it is in the poem, but because they wanted to go for more modern style, modern sounding dialogue. But I appreciated that scene. I thought that the spirit of that scene was pretty similar to the spirit of it in the poem, and that was a moment I liked, that they kind of stayed with what was in the poem.
And Andromache, I hope I'm not wrong. I think she's a survivor. She ends up surviving, and they end up seeing her. Aeneas' group ends up seeing her, so that's kind of cool. And
there's a really cool line where he says, when he's showing her the tunnel, and he's like, when the Greeks sack the city, they'll take you as a slave, and that'll be worse than death. That's kind of a paraphrase of a line that she says in the poem. Yeah. He's like, I'd rather die than be taken as slave or something. And and another beat that I really liked that they hit was the scene between Priam and Achilles. Obviously, they take word for word the line of dialogue where he says, I've done what nobody else has ever done. Kiss the head of the man who killed my son or whatever. And I thought, from my reading the Iliad, I felt that they captured some of the spirit of that scene in the movie, and I appreciated that. So those are some of the big moments that I thought they did stay more faithful to the poem. Yeah. But I don't know.
That last one, no. I thought that was really inaccurate. Achilles is so he's so loving to Priam, and he kind of is in the movie. But in the book, oh my gosh, he just treats him like his dad. He cries with him for like a really long time about what happened.
In the poem or the movie?
In the poem.
Okay.
Like literally is just with him in tears, and the book makes it seem like that he's crying over Patroclus, but he's also just weeping.
What did you think of that scene, Nate? The scene between Priam and Achilles. Like,
that's a good scene.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it in the movie, and I don't know. I mean, we can just disagree on that one. I thought it kind of stayed true to a little bit of the spirit of that scene.
Maybe a little bit. And I think the big thing too at the end is the sack of Troy. It's kind of like the big, how everything falls out and stuff like that. There's a lot of it that was true too. Yeah. Like they come out of the thing, they open the gates, they wave the torch, and that was what tells the people to come up. They had turned the ships had gone just around the corner where you couldn't see them. They were all in this cove. Yeah. So then they all come up, and that's how they get into the city, and they take them all by surprise. That's all in the story.
I do appreciate also how they really showed. God, what was I gonna say? It was gonna be something about the. Oh yeah, I really appreciate the some of the cinematography. I didn't get to mention this. Eli mentioned it in his pauses, but in the sacking of Troy, there's an amazing shot of the Greek army storming the city, and it starts. There's a big scramble, and then they slowly have to file into the gate, and the music's playing. Great score by Horner, and it's just like you really feel the emotion. They're like, oh, it's over. Like you said, it's over. And that was a great. And there's so many great shots in this movie. Like another really cool one is where they're the shot of the 1,000 ships. and Achilles on the boat, and it kind of like zooms out, and you see 1,000 ships. Obviously, it's CGI, but it's still pretty. Cool. It's still pretty darn cool. So there's a lot of cool epic cinematography in this movie. But anyway, so are there any other kind of big things that you hated about kind of some of the?
There are more, but there's more. But
so do we want to talk a little bit about themes? Unless Nate, you have any more thoughts? No,
those are all my thoughts.
Oh, we wanted to. You brought it up earlier about the historical authenticity of the war, because I know you said you had a thought on that.
Well, yes, I mentioned that in the first half of this episode, and I think that is well established that Gavin is of the opinion that Homer was a historian rather than a poet.
Okay, wait. Whoa! Oh, man. No, I mean, he is writing about historical things. The question is what he wrote necessarily exactly? How much of what he wrote is true?
I can't tell you where I stand on this issue because I don't have enough information. But what I can tell you is that the sides that currently exist, and that's that some people believe that the outlandish things plus the longevity in the past of this of this poem point to it being purely mythical, while others suggest that it is as similar to other histories written in more recent times as is reasonably possible, and therefore should be treated as a historical work, much like those other historians such as Herodotus, such as ones that I'm more familiar with in the medieval times, such as William of Tyre.
I've heard of him. Mm-hmm. But are you talking about like the whole war, or like the story of the Iliad?
The whole story.
The whole war.
The whole story. Yeah.
Okay. What about the excavation at Troy though, in Turkey, where they actually?
There's an excavation. There was this dark time where there was a specific archaeologist that went there.
And I know it was like Heinrich something.
Yeah,
he was German.
He fabricated a lot of what he found, and he messed up a lot of the archaeological digs at Troy. But we ended up finding more, and we have accurate accounts of Alexander the Great going to Troy, and
Heinrich Schliemann
Alexander supposedly visits the grave of Achilles.
Yeah. The grave of Achilles.
And so does Julius Caesar at some point. So, I mean, this place was a real place that people throughout the centuries go to.
But would you agree though that some of the mythological aspects would be like Achilles being dipped in the water, and actually he was not actually only vulnerable?
No, yeah, you could say that.
Like that
but
stuff.
Here's the thing. What we can, like, the stuff that I can say, okay, that could happen. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if it did, but it could have happened. That stuff I cannot disprove.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't there and nobody else wrote contrary evidence to it, right? And so since there's not contrary facts, and there's no way I'm going to be able to prove that something else happened unless we find another document that tells us more, then this is just what I have to believe happened during the Trojan War.
Y'all want my hot take on this?
Yeah, I want your hot take. I'll give my hot take after.
Yeah, this is my hot take.
Completely different matter.
This is my hot take, and this is coming from my perspective as viewing this from a Protestant worldview. Right, as all of us are. Calvinist counts as Protestant.
Yeah. Protestant means non-Catholic.
Just making sure.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't want
No, you're good. No,
I didn't want to misrepresent his theology. Now, coming at this from a Catholic, a Protestant perspective, I think that it is possible that a lot of these ancient pantheons that these people worshipped actually existed and were demonic in nature.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that this is consistent with a lot of things that are alluded to in the Bible, such as the fallen angels coming down to mankind.
The Nephilim, right?
Yes, and the Bible calls these the Nephilim. That's the pronunciation I use. Okay. It calls them the heroes of old. And that language really connects that to these stories. Not only Greek stories, but Roman stories and Norwegian stories, old Norwegian stories. These pantheons all share something in common. Egyptian pantheon as well. They share something in common, and the common themes are that there's multiple gods. the gods are very human-like in
Mhm.
appearance and in behavior.
Yep.
And they feature, strong powers, but these powers are connected to certain elements or themes or topics. And a lot of times, the elements and themes and topics are the same across culturally. It's for example, these cultures have gods of war, gods of love, gods of nature, and it might seem intuitive to name it these things, but really it's uncannily similar.
Now you bring up the history of the Bible. I'm just curious. We never got this point mentioned, this fact mentioned. What is the estimated time period of the Trojan War?
So we're saying 3,200 BC.
At the beginning of the movie, it says 3,200 years
I think
ago.
that's what it says.
Yeah,
I think that's the date. I can double check and see what
From
this,
2000.
what Bagel says.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious because
Yeah,
you're
I'm
mentioning the
sure.
Nephilim, and that's in
Mhm.
Genesis, like chapter 5 or 6. somewhere in
Exactly.
there.
Yes. And now that's in a shaky connection at best. I'm sure that there's arguments out there against that. That people would say, no, these people just made these gods up.
I mean, I think we know.
Et
Also,
cetera,
we
et
know that they
cetera.
had statues of them and all the stuff we
Yes,
found.
and I think that it's very consistent with the. So the Bible characterizes the Nephilim as being wicked angels who sort of took human women as wives, and then they presided over these huge empires.
Yeah.
And the empires that they would have presided over could have possibly been these. It's a case of perspective as far as history is concerned, but
Yeah.
what I believe to be true leads me to think this. And so, therefore, this might seem outlandish, but according to that view of the events, it is possible that Homer is actually telling the truth with a lot of this, and that there was this interplay between Nephilim and humanity. And them like picking sides and picking favorite humans and doing all these wicked things. It sounds like it. It does.
There's this. I love this Bible story. It's really obscure, but there's one of these. It's Abraham, and it's Lot gets captured. Have you read that one?
Hmm?
There's one. It's the kingdoms of Sodom and Gomorrah are in a fight,
Okay.
and Abraham and Lot gets captured somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And there's sons of giants
Yeah.
that compete in the battle.
Mm-hmm.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, there's
I
sons
remember
of
that
giants.
battle where
And so they're
Abraham
really
goes to
tall.
rescue
They're and so the Bible says that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so like when the Iliad's saying, "Oh yeah, this guy was 9 feet tall,"
Yeah. Well,
I'm like, Roger that.
another reference that pops to mind is when remind me of his name, the guy who led the invasion into the Holy Land, or excuse me, the Promised Land. Was it Jacob?
Joshua.
Joshua, yeah,
Thank you. So, in the
Son
account
of
of
man.
Joshua, you know how he sends his spies to survey the land,
Right.
and they go to this certain area. I forget what the
Jericho.
area is.
Oh
called.
no,
Not
no, that's
Jericho.
before Jericho.
There's this other certain area, and they come
Canaan.
back and they
It's basically
report.
just Canaan.
Well, yes, but like within Canaan,
Oh, yeah.
and they tell
The giants,
Joshua,
yeah.
and they say these people are massive.
They make humans look like grasshoppers.
Exactly. They make humans look like grasshoppers. And if there's somebody that big, like that's
Yeah.
another one.
Obviously, we know there was Goliath. So,
Goliath
yeah.
existed.
But anyway, and there is a giant in this movie, which is pretty cool. At the
It is
beginning,
pretty
there's a
cool.
giant that Achilles takes down in one little stab.
Yeah, and so like it could have been possible that these creatures
What, did we get
could
a
have.
date?
Hear me out, guys.
What?
This is crazy. This is a Bible reference, though, right? Jericho probably fell after the Trojan War.
Whoa, dude.
But wait, think of that.
What year?
What are the Jericho people thinking? They're like, and this is just me speculating, but like, it took 10 years for that city to fall.
Yeah. Mhm.
We'll take just as long,
Okay. Yeah.
and God does it
No.
in like no time,
No.
and the wall's just like, and he just breaks it, and he doesn't need a Trojan horse. He doesn't. He just.
I have a
Isn't that
question-
crazy?
I have a question for
Dang!
y'all. I have a
That's
question for y'all.
awesome.
So in the movie, there is that reference, and where Nestor, is that his name? The assistant, kind of the
Yeah,
assistant.
the
yeah.
Agamemnon, sure.
And says that if we retreat, we'll lose all credibility.
Yeah.
The Hittites might invade.
So
Now,
maybe that
tell
is
us-
a little more accurate.
Give us a
yeah.
little bit of context on that. Like, where are the Hittites?
So there's the Peloponnese, which is
Yeah.
this big area, and the Peloponnese, and so you have the Phoenicians off to the side, which is
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
Israel is nowadays, up into Turkey.
Yeah, which is what
And that is a collection of the Hittites are there, and the Hittites are what combat the Israelites
Yeah.
way at the beginning. Philistines are also.
Yeah.
What about the Assyrians?
Syrians are further east,
Yeah.
so even further east than all of that.
Yeah.
And they're gonna come up after those two big kingdoms fall. The Hittites fall first, then the Phoenicians fall, but not after they travel and they start settlements, possibly in Carthage, is what we're thinking. We think Dido was probably related to Jezebel.
Dido? Who's Dido?
She's in the Aeneid. Have you read the Aeneid?
The Aeneid?
I know the name. I'm forgetting who she was.
So Dido was related to Jezebel?
Oh yes,
How?
Dido was the queen of the country that Aeneas.
Wait, Dido's a woman?
And
Yeah, she's a
Dido,
woman.
to clarify, so I can actually tell this one.
Yeah.
Dido in the Aeneid is the queen of this like country. I forget the name of it. Carthage. Yeah, that Aeneas and his boys go into, and she falls like in love with Aeneas, and so madly in love with him that she ends up killing herself whenever he rejects her love because he has to go on home, obviously, or go on and found the new place for Troy, which is Rome, obviously.
So what's the connection between her and Jezebel?
There's some type of relation. It's just some speculated relation. I can't remember what it is.
Conjecture.
No, I remember that being speculated. I have to do some research. I'll bring some research.
But Nate, I just want
to
before we go into the final section of themes, like, what was your what are your final thoughts on just from what you've heard of Gavin, just the history of it and how the movie compares to the Iliad?
Yeah.
Like, what's your opinion?
I think it's very much a modern interpretation. Of the facts of the matter.
Yeah.
And it could have been done better.
Yeah.
But in the end, it is a very entertaining product.
Yeah. To me too.
Yeah, it's an entertaining product. Now, y'all know I've expressed my opinion on this before, but I'll reinstate it, and that I think movie makers who make historical movies have a duty to make it as accurate as possible, because this becomes common knowledge of history throughout culture.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, it's fine because we didn't say that it's supposed to be accurate, but it doesn't matter. Because that's what makes it into public perception. Let's be real. People aren't reading books as much these days.
Especially this one.
They're just not. And so these movies are what we remember about our ancestors, and that is important.
Yeah.
That is what we think about where we came from.
Yeah.
And whether you believe it or not, that's important.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these creators, they neglect their duty, and therefore they erode our collective history, and they erode the bonds we have with each other in our culture itself.
Now, I would like to, I don't know if you're finished.
Yeah,
I would like to give an opinion. So I totally agree with what you said. Now, I feel like in this instance, with this movie, Troy, it is a bit, yes, it is historical in a sense. Like, we know that the Troy existed. We know there probably was a Trojan War. But it is based on a poem, which a lot of like the specific plot lines in the poem are we don't know, like what we've talked about, if they actually were true. So it is based on somewhat of a mythological story. So I feel like this movie, Troy, gets a little bit more of a leash for me, because, I mean, they are making a movie based on an ancient Greek poem, based on, like, events that we know probably happened in a broad sense, but not, like, the specific, like, oh, Achilles was, like, invulnerable other than his ankle. So I give them, I'm not, like, offended or anything about anything they did in this movie.
It's not even really
like I wasn't,
offense.
like, in Braveheart. It's a bit more egregious, because that's not, like, conjecture that they're basing it on. That's actual, like, history.
To respond to that, even though it's not, like, solid rock history like World War II is, it's still the foundation of Western culture and thought. It still contributes to the connective tissue of Western society, and therefore they still have a duty to make it accurate.
So what do you think about how they did then?
What they did? So it's entertaining, but it falls short of my standard concerning this because of the reasons that I just explained.
But I just kind of disagree, because I think it's more based on a story, like a very fictional story to me.
Here's one thing I'll say, though, and I think this is what the movie did. I would have given them that leash. I would have given it to them, but this is what they did at the beginning of the movie. They slapped a date on it.
Oh, yeah.
And right when you slap a date and you put this in a timeline, you're telling people, hey,
it's real.
This event happened at this date, and all of a sudden, it's in my timeline of history. And all of a sudden, my leash got a ton tighter, because this is... I'm now putting it up against the things I know, or at least I'm guessing from this. Happened on that date. Guess what? What happened in that movie did not happen on that date, but when people think about this movie and they remember what that date was, that's what they're going to think of the Trojan War. And you're right, we're eroding what we think about these characters. All of a sudden, Paris isn't such a bad person. All of a sudden, Helen isn't an adulterous, horrible human that she is portrayed, this unfaithful wife that she's portrayed in the book.
I agree. The betrayal of, I will agree on that. The betrayal of Helen is not great in the movie in terms of just her character. I mean, she's basically just kind of there in the movie. Yeah. And, you know, in the poem, she actually has some great lines that she gives, and she literally calls herself like a whore, and once in like herself, she calls herself a whore. Anyway, no, I guess, I mean, I just enjoyed the movie. Do we want to get on to themes? And
yeah, let's go ahead and wrap it up. This has been a pretty long one.
Oh,
so
yeah.
So let's wrap it up pretty quickly.
You don't want to go over a couple themes?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Oh,
we're
okay.
going to go over themes,
Cool.
but just be quick about
Yeah.
it. So let me just talk about
Each of us just give our big ones.
Yeah, so I actually liked the moral messages of this movie. I think that one of the themes that they presented about in this movie is like the cycle of violence. You know, they talk about this in one of the tent scenes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, where does it end? It never ends.
Yeah.
You know, and like the cycle of vengeance to violence to vengeance. That's one of the themes of this movie. Another one of the themes of this movie is that is hammered a ton is being remembered. You know, and like you're etching your name in history.
And I thought that was accurate to like what a lot of the Greeks thought. Like they wanted to be remembered.
Yeah. So and it featured a lot of strong moral representations that that can be learn from. Hector is the best example, but also his father is a good example. There are good decisions that come from people who are not like echelons of virtue, such as Odysseus. You know, even some decisions that are made by not Hector. No, the Brad Pitt. Achilles. You know, showed that people who don't always make the best decisions can always flip around and make a hard decision that benefits people for the good. It also featured negative representations of people that can be learned from, because those are just as important as the positive ones when done properly, when shed in the right light. And Agamemnon is an example of that. His brother is an example of that. I think to a large extent Paris is an example of that. So that's another duty that I think movies have, is to because stories in a society serve the purpose of teaching us how to behave, and I think that this movie actually achieves that bar. In my perspective, that duty was met.
All right, Gavin, what do you?
I think one big thing for me, and I think it was not only is it applicable to today, but it's really applicable, and it was a big value for the Greeks at the time, even in the Iliad. Although it's not as emphasized in the Iliad, it's really emphasized in other Greek myths, is the value of family. And just like how important that is on both sides. We talked about how Achilles and his cousin Patroclus, and like how that was such a tight bond. And that Achilles feels this duty towards Patroclus, not because necessarily Patroclus is anything special, because he's his cousin and he's just training him to be the best soldier. He's trying to take care of him. And then Hector is such an incredible family man. Not only for his wife as a husband and as a father, he's incredible. Putting himself last, he's putting his wife's protection, his son's protection first. Even having those hard conversations. Saying, hey, when I die, because he knows he is, this is what you need to do. And instead of just trying to put off the inevitable, he faces those really hard decisions head on. He's always protecting his brother, even at the cost of everything. He literally sacrifices everything for that horrible, stinking, awful brother of his. I don't know if I would have had
He cares nothing but himself.
Exactly. And so I think that was a really big Greek value, that no matter how horrible your relatives are, you share DNA with them. And so
I love that scene where finish your thought.
No, yeah, but you put your neck on the line for them, and so that's
one of my favorite scenes of dialogue and my favorite scenes of acting in this movie is on the ship when Paris reveals that he's taken stolen Helen. And you're gonna be like Paris, and he's like, what about the country? I mean, that scene is just like, that gets me fired up. I'm like, yeah, bro, what are your priorities, man? Like, for sure. He's like, Hector's like, what about your father's love? You spat on him when you brought her on the ship. For sure. Anyway, so for me, I'll go ahead and go with my big themes and try to bounce off of you. Or bounce off of Nate. I think you mentioned this one, like honor and glory, and just how important that is to the Greek people. I think that was one of the more accurate things they got from the poem, and especially with the character of Achilles, I think they really did a good job of really just emphasizing how that was why he was there. Like, he was there because he wanted to be remembered, and he was like wanted his glory, and that was a big thing in all of Greek society and Trojan society, I assume. And another theme I found was just like I said in that scene between Hector and Paris, just like, I love how like certain people have their priorities right and other people's don't, and I think the message is, where's your priority going to be? Because everybody in this movie has different priorities. Okay, you have Agamemnon, who's just wants out there for power. He's all about gods support only the strong. And then you have people like Odysseus who are there to serve others and are there to he's there for his country. And he's the only one that's really there for Greece, it seems like, on the Greek side.
Agreed.
And you have his priorities there, and then you have Achilles' priorities of, like I said, just wanting to get honor, and he's all about himself. Yeah. And similarly, that's with Paris. Paris is all about himself, and he just, he tries to put off a little bit of humility, and he starts feeling bad about it, but still, it's like, this all started because of you and your stupid priorities and just wanting what you want. And then you obviously have the side characters of like Briseis and her, she's just kind of in the middle of all this, but yet she still has her priorities of like commitment to her home and like the gods and commitment to what she feels so special. And so I just love how there's all these different kind of angles that the characters come from, and I think that they really emphasize some of the themes of the movie, which are honor, glory, commitment, and like knowing where your priorities are and having the right priorities. And I also just love just the theme of, just doing what's right, like from the sense of like, especially with Hector. And like, even though that, like you said, Paris is a little scumbag, like, to put it pretty bluntly, Hector is still like, I'm going to protect you though. Like, I'm not just going to like let you die. I don't think anybody would like just let their brother die, just even if he did something terrible. Like, you'd still protect him. And I know we don't like that Menelaus died, but Hector in that moment of when he kills Menelaus shows that he has like this unending love for his brother. So I feel like love is a big theme for me in this movie. Love for country, love for family, like we said, and obviously, and love for oneself, and that's obviously pride, and that's a negative thing, but it's portrayed in the movie in a very good way through the characters of Agamemnon and Menelaus and Achilles specifically. So I think those are some of the big themes for me in this movie, and I think the themes in the movie are quite good, and a lot of them are portrayed in a good way. But anyway, so we want to move on to final thoughts.
Yeah, I think we.
I just mean like
I think a 7 out of 10 is my rating for this movie.
And what would you tell like people who haven't seen it?
Yeah, I think this is a very entertaining movie. I think it could inform you well morally as far as factually. I would steer away from it as far as that. Get familiar with the original material. Like, you don't have to read all these books if you don't want to. There's YouTube videos.
You can enjoy this as a movie, contrary to what you would think. I'm just playing.
Yeah, and so that's what I would think about that 7 out of 10. It's pretty good.
Yeah. And what about yours? And we need your message to Wolfgang Petersen, David Benioff, the filmmakers.
Well, all right. So Eli whispered his, and he said it was the same as mine. Okay. So I'm giving it a 4.5. Woo! I know, it's a 4.5.
That is
look,
so
it's coming.
What are the biggest? You have to be like the biggest.
Yeah, I gotta give my biggest thing. It was historically pretty inaccurate. It really frustrated me. I really disliked. Some of just like the dialogue was really silly, and I really disliked.
Some of it was.
Yes, some of the props didn't make sense, and I did love the battle scenes though, so that helped.
Some of the actors.
You
said you liked some of the acting,
and the acting was good. It's fun. It's worth it if you like Brad Pitt. If you like a lot of Brad Pitt,
you're a girl.
I'll say this: do not let the woman in your life watch. This movie.
This is a guy. Guys only. This is a guy.
I will say this is like the war movie. It seems like that a lot of girls like love.
I wonder why. Yeah. We've covered all the girl war movies. We've got this and Pearl Harbor.
Oh, nice.
Oh my gosh. So what's your message to Wolfgang? Like,
No, I mad respect. I thought the movie. Yeah, I think the movie was. You did a great job, and I wish there was some stuff that I wish you had hired me and brought me out and paid me
how old
millions
were you in
of
2004?
I was 2.
Okay.
I was 2. So now you all know how old I am.
Yeah.
But but I wish you were a little bit more historically accurate. I wish some of the props were a little more. I wish you could have stuck to the story a little bit more and some of the themes in the book. Yeah, buddy. I don't know what llamas are doing there, but let's just not do that again.
Yeah.
Don't do that to me. That gave me a heart attack. I saw that and I was like, wait.
Can we budge you up to a 5?
No.
It's not even just okay. It's like below average.
It's below average.
As a movie.
Like, I'm never watching the movie again.
Okay.
Sorry.
hurts
I'm
me.
so sorry. I'm sorry.
You
guys.
still had a fun time watching it. It's fun.
I'll go watch.
There were entertaining moments because you were. There were some.
There's some cool fight scenes.
I'll say this movie would be a 4.5 for me if we were a society that was making good movies right now. Like,
I agree. I agree.
so many
I
bad
agree.
movies
You're
that
probably lower.
it makes this a 7.
Okay,
This
you know
shouldn't
that might
be a
be.
This
7.
man gave Pearl Harbor like a 7, didn't you?
Well, it's because the movies that we pick are movies that are done by skillful, serious people who actually want to see their craft
I could show
succeed.
y'all.
That might bump me up to a 5.
Because
I don't
you know,
like
it's whether the movies that we review sometimes are flawed, but they're made by serious people who are serious about their art and who have a lot of resources. And so generally the byproduct is at least decent. Now there are a lot of movies these days that while they have good and a lot of the movies that we watch are old, which means they have more of a moral
What's the newest
backbone.
movie we've done?
Valkyrie
was 08, Oppenheimer,
Yeah,
But
Oppenheimer.
it
Because
is
we watched that
old.
right out of the theater. I mean, there are a few holdouts of creators who are still making stuff with a good moral backbone, but 20 years ago, our society had a straighter and a firmer moral backbone than it has today. Within the past 20 years, we have gotten more depraved. And that is reflected in the art that we make. The art that we make is depraved and nonsensical and relies on shock value. And you can see it creeping into this movie with like the nudity and stuff. You can see it creeping in. It's not quite taken over yet, but it's coming in there. And for that reason, this movie's a 7 because everything else is just so bad.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, now
Yeah.
we might want to we tried to do this with Pearl Harbor, but we ended up disagreeing. I think that we should review a movie that is just like so bad,
A bad historical
just like
movie.
really bad.
I'll think of one.
Napoleon shoot!
Anyway,
You saw it?
was that
Yeah,
right?
I know about it.
We
though.
got to talk about that off air because
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'll get my final thoughts
Yeah, go
now.
ahead.
So I'm gonna kind of I disagree on the quality of the movie. Like I do think that you said you appreciate some of the movie,
Yeah.
and it's entertaining at times, and you just like it aggravates you a little bit too much what they did with some of it. But I give this movie. I'll agree with Nate. I would give this a 7 out of 10. So that it's a pretty good movie to me, and I would just say that I think that this movie has a lot of positives. It's exciting to watch. And that to me is what I like in a movie. I mean, I like watching movies that I want to watch, obviously. And this movie is exciting to me. I enjoy it. I get kind of enthralled with it, and it's just it has a extremely interesting premise, and it's just cool to watch this big war unfold. And I'm a sucker for like big battle sequences, and this movie's full of them, and it's just cool to me. So that's my biggest positive. And and I also just, as I said, I love the acting, I love the themes in the movie, and I love I love so many aspects of this movie, but there are negatives for me. That's why it's not any higher than a 7. There's a lot of cheesiness in the movie. There's some dialogue that's delivered kind of clunkily, as Eli put it. That was a good way of putting that. And there's sometimes the pacing within certain sequences can be a bit off. Well, I think the pacing overall was good, but sometimes the battles can go on a bit too long. But I think that overall, this movie is a 7 out of 10 for me. I mean, I like this movie.
Yep.
And to the director, I mean, I think that when the filmmakers sat down and were like, okay, so we got the money, we're going to adapt this epic poem into a film. And I think that the fact that they even were able to do it, like with that's a hard piece of literature, I feel like, to adapt into a movie, and like that would be for like modern audiences to enjoy. And I appreciate that they actually did it. Like they made an attempt. Yes, I agree with a lot of Gavin's complaints about some of the inaccuracies and the inconsistencies in between the book and the movie, but I can forgive some of them. Some of them don't bother me as much. Some of them do bother me a little bit more. But I appreciate that they actually made this movie, and it's cool that it exists to me. And so I think I appreciate the ambitiousness and the kind of not veracity, but just the ambitiousness of the filmmakers in making this product, this film. And I appreciate that it exists, as I said. So yeah, I would give this a solid 7 out of 10. Yeah. And I think Wolfgang did a pretty good job. And Yeah, it's my favorite movie of his. And so yeah, I think 7 out of 10 for me.
If y'all made it through this, you did better than Eli.
Yeah, facts.
He had to go home.
I really
He didn't
appreciate
say.
y'all if y'all watched this to the end.
Salute to Eli, by the way, when you watch this.
Enduring
We
this
appreciate
very
your thoughts.
lengthy discussion of ours, but I think that within this discussion there were some great nuggets of truth and wisdom that we discussed. And at the end of the day, I hope y'all came away from something. Thank you for watching another episode. We don't know when the next episode or what the next episode will be, but it will be awesome as always. We might even have a guest. We might even have Gavin back. Who knows? So until then,
if we can wrangle him in,
we'll see you next
if he doesn't
time.
use his phone. Alrighty, boys.